Hi, good evening. Welcome along. This is the Transfer Show. There are less than 21 days of the window to go. And are we about to see a Premier League scramble for one of the best goalkeepers in the world? Well, we might, because there is significant news on Gianluigi Donnarumma coming up. Dharmesh Chef is with me this evening. Also coming up, why Jack Grealish chose Everton to revive his career and the numbers behind the move. We'll be live to Newcastle as they close in on at least one new signing. And will he, won't he? We'll get the very latest on Alexander Isak and ask if he's now more likely to stay in the northeast. Benjamin Sesko turned down Newcastle to join Manchester United. He tells us why this hour. And we've been with Arsenal today. And after Mikel Arteta said that they're actively looking at options in the market, we'll have a look at who could leave and who could come in. Let's start with Jack Grealish, though, who's finalising his medical at Everton before a season-long loan from Manchester City. Our reporter, Vinny O'Connor, is at Everton's training ground with more.
Jack Grealish will become Everton's sixth signing of the summer. He underwent a medical on Monday afternoon, and his arrival on a season-long loan from Manchester City follows swiftly on the back of the signing of Kiernan Dewsbury Hall. And it is a deal that could become permanent itself next summer as well, with Everton having the option to buy Jack Grealish now for £50 million. He, of course, cost Manchester City £100 million when they signed him from Aston Villa back in 2021. And this is a real coup for Everton. There were other clubs looking at Jack Grealish, but Everton were the first to make their move and put their money on the table. Grealish feasibly could have waited until later in the window, in fact, right up until the transfer deadline as well, to see what other options presented themselves to him. But the most important thing for him is to get back playing regular first-team football as soon as possible. He is desperate to get back in the England squad ahead of the World Cup, even as early as the games against Andorra and Serbia next month. We know, of course, how disappointed he was to have missed out on the England squad for the Euros as well. And clearly a repeat of last season, where he played just 32 games in all competitions for Manchester City, making just seven Premier League starts, would not do his international chances any favours at all. And that was also in City's thinking in leaving him out of the Club World Cup squad. So he got that opportunity to sort out his future. And just remember, back in 2021, David Moyes described him as possibly the best player in the Premier League at that time. Now he will get the opportunity to play under David Moyes and reignite his career. As for the other possible new arrivals, well, we know Everton are still in the market for reinforcements at right back, defensive midfield and attacking wide right at the very least. We also know of the bids that they've had turned down by Southampton for Tyler Dibbling, while they're also looking at Abdul Fatawu at Leicester City as another option down that side. But at least now they're getting closer to the number of players that David Moyes felt he needed to get in during this summer transfer window.
So, Dharmesh, does this move work for everybody?
I think Vinny made a great point there with regard to Jack Grealish and his mentality and his approach, because, as he said there, could he have got other clubs getting interested in him the later in the window we went? We know it's September the 1st that the window closes, and within 9 or 10 days of the window closing, that's when England are back in action in the first international break. He wants to be up and running at the start of the season, starting this weekend, if it can all get sorted, so that he can show Thomas Tuchel what he's about really early and stake his claim to get into those squads. And I think it's a great move for Everton and for Grealish as well. He just needs to play. And it's a real coup, as Vinny mentioned there, about getting someone like Jack Grealish at Everton. And if you look back on his City career, I always hear there's always two sides to this. Has it been a success at City? Has it not been a success at City?
Look at his medals.
Look at his medals, but if you look at Manchester City's most successful season in their entire history was the treble-winning season of 2022-2023. He was a key member of that team, and in their Champions League campaign of that season, he started 13 of their Champions League games. That's more than any other City player, including goalkeepers. That has to say something about what his time at Manchester City was like in their most successful season. And he was in the top 7, I think, of the players who, on the number of games, started in the Premier League in that season as well. Clearly, it hasn't worked last season. It looks like a fresh start is good for him now.
Now, the news of Grealish and this imminent move, not a surprise. What did surprise me this morning was hearing that Savinho might be on the move. What's the latest on that?
You're not the only one that was surprised. I think a lot of Manchester City fans would be surprised as well. But Tottenham clearly like the player. They've approached Manchester City about signing Savinho. There have been talks between the two clubs. City, though, are not interested in selling Savinho. And it would take, you would think, a really, really huge offer from Spurs for City to even consider letting him go. Remember, he only signed last summer. And some of the games that he played, people were thinking City have got a really, really good one here. And any recruitment that Manchester City might have in the wide forward area, I think would be contingent on Savinho leaving. But the noises we're getting at the moment is that they don't want to sell him. However, if Spurs were to test their resolve, it would be interesting to see what Manchester City would do. There's been lots of talk around social media and a few journalists talking about Rodrigo from Real Madrid interesting Manchester City. Look, the information we're getting at the moment it's speculation, but it might just be one to keep an eye on in the final weeks of this window, particularly if they end up doing business on Savinho. Because if Rodrigo, the player you see in your picture there, does not get the game time that he wants in his preferred position under Xabi Alonso at Real Madrid, maybe he will then go to Madrid in the final couple of weeks of this transfer window and say, maybe this isn't the place for me after all, as reluctant as he would be to want to leave there. But one to keep an eye on, I think. Yeah,
he obviously has history with City. James McAtee, what's the latest on him?
Right, so, I mean, all day we've been talking about this Court of Arbitration of Sports hearing into Crystal Palace, and that could have an impact on what Nottingham Forest do for the rest of this transfer window, because they now know, and it's been confirmed, that they will be in the Europa League, and this could have a direct impact on who they can sign and potentially players who would want to go. You mentioned James McAtee. We're told that talks are now advancing between Nottingham Forest and Manchester City over McAtee. City and Forest yet to agree a fee, though it's thought City would want more than around £20 million. McAtee himself open to the move. Personal terms not expected to be a problem. He's got interest from Germany as well. RB Leipzig and Borussia Dortmund remain interested, but Forest, they look like they're really pursuing and pushing for this one to the point where they retain a hope that maybe he might even be part of their squad in time for their Premier League opener against Brentford on Sunday. Bit of a way to go yet, but it looks like the direction of travel here is that Forest really pushing to sign him.
Oh, interesting. All right, there's loads to get sorted out at Newcastle as well, as we know. So let's bring in our reporter Keith Downey, who covers that patch for us. Keith, obviously we're going to talk Alexander Isak in just a moment. First, though, Malick Thiaw. Now, we saw him leave Milan last night, so where's this deal up to?
Yeah, it's close to being completed. He, as you rightly say, travelled in from Milan late last night. Just as darkness fell, he arrived in the northeast. Of course, we saw pictures sent to us from Sky Italy of him leaving the airport in Milan last night before coming in here. This is a deal that Newcastle have got over the line quickly this weekend, but it's a player that they have liked for a long time. They've paid £30 million plus £4 million in add-ons, and he's the central defender that Eddie Howe has been looking to add this window. So he's been having his medical today, Mike. We expect the deal to be finalised soon, and I think the hope is that he'll be able to take part in training, if not tomorrow, certainly by Wednesday, and Newcastle hope that they can have him in the squad for their season opener against Aston Villa on Saturday.
Yeah, OK. All right, let's talk Alexander Isak. We have to do that. Less than 3 weeks now until the close of the window. So what's your reading of the situation?
Look, I think the longer this goes on, the longer there is stalemate, so to speak, the more likelihood there is of Alexander Isak playing for Newcastle this season. Look, Liverpool came in for him 10 days ago, didn't they, with that bid of £110 million plus add-ons. It feels like it's been a long 10 days since then. Now, of course, as we know, Newcastle tried to line up a replacement for him. They thought Benjamin Sesko was that man. Instead, of course, he opted for Manchester United at the last moment, and it left Newcastle high and dry. I feel their options now, between now and the end of the transfer window, are getting less and less. And I think there's a huge question mark hanging over the Isak deal, because Newcastle will not allow the Swedish striker to leave and join Liverpool if they don't have a ready-made replacement lined up. As I say, the options are fairly thin on the ground, and as the days tick on, I would say it's increasingly likely that he will be a Newcastle player this season. Certainly for the first part of the season anyway. We'll wait and see what happens in January. But of course, with that, there's going to have to be a lot of work behind the scenes. Clearly not happy, Alexander Isak, but neither are the Newcastle United supporters. It feels like there's been a lot of bridges burned these last couple of weeks. They're not happy with his conduct, so a lot is going to have to be smoothed over behind the scenes for him to continue here and continue in a positive way, because he was a real fan's favourite. Think of all those Newcastle fans, Mike, who of course he reduced to tears at the cup final back in March with that winner against Liverpool. People have got Isak 14 tattooed all over their body. You see kids in the street everywhere in Newcastle with Isak 14 on their shirt. And I think for them, they just feel really let down by his conduct these last couple of weeks. So Eddie Howe's going to have to do his best man management skills with not just the player, but with the supporters as well, to ensure that they can move on from this. But look, there is still 3 weeks left. I wouldn't be surprised if Liverpool came in with another bid. But until Newcastle have a ready-made replacement, and as I say, they don't have many options left, until they get someone in, Alexander Isak will be going nowhere.
OK, what about Johan Wissa? Will he be joining Newcastle?
Yeah, I'm just off a call literally in the last 5 minutes about that. Look, Newcastle remain at the table, very hopeful of getting a deal done. But again, this one's become a bit of a saga now as well. It's dragged on for a number of weeks. Brentford, probably in a similar situation to Newcastle with Isak. They don't want to allow Wissa to go until they get a replacement in themselves. Now, we know that they're in talks with Dango Outara, the Bournemouth winger. I think there's a potential, if they get him in, that they might soften their stance a little bit with Wissa. I think Newcastle would love to have him in by the weekend to try and involve him against Aston Villa, but it's a waiting game for them. I still think there's a high chance of this deal getting done, but again, it's a very protracted transfer, a bit like the Isak situation, really. They're playing out very, very similarly. And look, Newcastle have been patient. It looks like they're going to have to still be a little bit more patient if they're to bring in Wissa. But remember, even if Wissa does arrive, that has no effect on the Alexander Isak situation. Wissa is the replacement for Callum Wilson, and if Isak was to leave, they would still need to bring in another replacement to allow Isak to go. So I've seen a few people saying, oh, you get Wissa and that means that Isak will be allowed to leave. That's not the case. The two are completely unrelated.
Indeed. What about Kieran Trippier? Is he leaving?
Yeah, finally, just some news we brought to you just a couple of hours ago, Mike. There's some interest in Kieran Trippier from AS Monaco over in France. He's got just 1 year left in his Newcastle deal. Look, Newcastle will not want to lose Kieran Trippier. He's such a big character in the dressing room. He's one of the leadership group. He was the first signing who came in after the takeover back in 2021. So Newcastle know how much he brings to the party behind the scenes. They know how important he is to the club. But I think the interest is genuine from AS Monaco, and they are exploring a deal. There's not been any contact with Newcastle officially yet, but they are considering making an approach for the England international fullback.
Keith, for the moment, thank you. We'll be back to you in a little while. Dharmesh, before we go to the break, now, this one got me going. Gianluigi Donnarumma, could he be leaving PSG for real?
It's certainly looking that way. PSG face Tottenham Hotspur in the Super Cup on Wednesday, and Gianluigi Donnarumma has been omitted from that squad for PSG. Today, PSG announced the signing of a keeper. That's Lille's Lucas Chevalier. He's joined PSG. He hasn't joined to be number 2. He's joined there to be the number 1 goalkeeper. And these latest developments, the fact that he's been out of the squad and that they brought in this new keeper, has thrown into major doubt the future of Gianluigi Donnarumma at PSG. Now, I've been told today that he will only leave if a project is seen as the right fit and he will not be forced out. Now, earlier on in this transfer window, it was understood that Manchester United had kept an eye on his situation. That's it, amid doubts over Andre Onana's future. However, Onana has now run his future training, and as it stands, he's expected to stay at Old Trafford. There are at least 2 other Premier League clubs who have explored the conditions of a potential deal for Donnarumma.
I bet they have.
That's via intermediaries. So we don't think there's been direct club-to-club contact as yet, but significantly, Donnarumma has entered the final year of his contract now. So PSG, if he's not going to sign a new contract, and he is on massive, massive money there at the moment, they will probably want to do some sort of deal. Now, if you look at Donnarumma's situation, the amount of money he would be on, PSG would see that as a win just to get those wages off the books. So it might not mean necessarily a club would need to go in with a massive transfer fee. As long as they paid the wages, you'll be looking at, close to 15 to 20 million pound saving straight away for PSG. So definitely one to keep an eye on, because it looks for all the money that Donnarumma's going to move, and for his own sake, he probably does need to move, because there's a World Cup at the end of the year. He's going to need to be playing.
Cool, what a story that is. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll assess Arsenal's plans for the final 3. We'll assess... And Benjamin Sesko tells us why he chose Manchester United over Newcastle. That and more to come in the Transfer Show.
Every Friday evening, I'll be bringing you interviews with the biggest names in the game, plus looking ahead at a weekend full of matches. And there'll be a special guest or two along the way. So join me, Roman Kemp, for Premier League Friday, every week from 5 till 7 on Sky Sports News. Your essential guide to the best league in the world before it all unfolds live on Sky Sports. Welcome to the weekend.
Top new signing for Sky Sports. All right, you're back with the transfer show. Arsenal will kick off their Premier League season at Manchester United on Sunday. Mikel Arteta has brought in 6 players already this summer, including an out-and-out striker in the form of Victor Gyökeres. So, are they done? Well, our reporter Gary Cottrell has more.
A busy 10 weeks in the transfer window so far for Arsenal. They've brought in, haven't they, about half a dozen players in every position: goalkeeper, defence, midfield, up top. So will they be cutting back? Will they be trimming the squad? As you can see, the gardener is doing to that bush there, trimming that bush back. Will players be trimmed from the playing squad at Arsenal? Well, of course, I think there will be players moving out, players who are back from being on loan last season, players who perhaps are now a little bit surplus to requirements. Reiss Nelson being linked with Fulham, Zinchenko, whose minutes last season compared to the season before were very limited. Vieira was out on loan, wasn't he, last season? Now back, expect him to go out again. Trossard, Leo Trossard, that's a difficult one because, of course, with all the changes, with all the players that have come in, he might find getting a start, getting many minutes with Arsenal more difficult than he ever has before. But he could bring in good money to the club if they do want to strengthen any more, balance the books a little bit. Although he is a popular player with Mikel Arteta, a good squad player, versatile, always willing to come in and do his very best, even if he's not in the starting lineup. And then Gabriel Jesus, what about his future with the arrivals that we've had at the club? Still injured, of course, still not back from that injury he picked up in January. But is there any mindset for him to leave the club and find football elsewhere when he is fit and playing again, if he is fit and playing again before the end of the transfer window? And in terms of ins, well, Eze, that name won't go away, will it? Particularly with the changes that Crystal Palace will now have to make to their planning with the news today that they're not going to be in the Europa League. They won't get the money into the club that they thought. They can't offer the standard of football in Europe, certainly, to the players that they've got. So would that make it more likely that Crystal Palace would sell some of their stars, including Eze, and Arsenal, we know, very interested in that player?
Gary Cottrell there. All right, Dharmesh, of the names that Gary mentioned, who are the most likely to leave Arsenal?
I can't put which is more likely or not. All of them could leave if they get the right offers. Gary made the point about Alexander Zinchenko. I think Arsenal would listen to suitable offers for him. Fulham are still pushing to sign Reiss Nelson. That one is definitely still on the table, even though it has taken quite a while because we've been talking about that for the best part of 6 weeks. Stuttgart still pushing to sign Fabio Vieira. Sambi Lokonga, surplus to requirements at Arsenal. And Gary made a great point there about Leandro Trossard, because I don't think Arsenal would actively look to sell, but it might be in Trossard's head, Gyökeres has arrived. Sometimes they play me up front. Well, I'm further behind the pecking order there. I was usually the first choice, maybe, when Martinelli wasn't playing, to play on the left side. Now Noni Madueke can play all along the front line. So maybe he might look at it himself with 2 years left on his contract. Is this the time maybe to go? Look, Arsenal beat Athletic Club on Saturday. Reiss Nelson, Lokonga, Zinchenko in the squad, unused substitutes. Trossard and Vieira not in the squad at all.
Yeah. Gary mentioned Eberechi Eze. Do we think that could happen?
Look, it's difficult at the moment because I think the focus at the moment is on sales, but I think what Arsenal want to do is be in a position that if an opportunity comes along, that they are in position to be able to act on that opportunity in the final 3 weeks. And Arteta has said it already, even after the games in pre-season. The noises he's making is that maybe they haven't finished in this window. There's been, we spoke about Rodrigo from Real Madrid earlier on in on the show. He's another player that Arsenal have kept an eye on throughout this transfer window as well. So it might not just be Manchester City, but Arsenal looking at what Rodrigo potentially because of that area that they want to strengthen.
Sure. Well, Arsenal could come up against Benjamin Sesko this weekend, a player, of course, they looked at signing before Victor Gyökeres. Well, as for Sesko, he chose Manchester United over Newcastle, as we know, and in his first interview with the club, he told us why.
First of all, of course, because of the club. It's just the historical club that is unbelievable. For me, the team is great. It's getting better and better, and that's why also there is just stuff that it made you like come there. You know, it gives you this already kind of, let's say, energy that you want to be part of. And yeah, I think it's just a great project in general, and can't wait to start, definitely.
Did Ruben Amorim play a part in that decision, obviously wanting to come here and play for him?
Of course, I think this is a really important part in general in football. Great guy, great coach, and so we're going to start, it's important.
Right, Dharmesh, so Sesko in, does that mean Højlund out?
It doesn't look good for Højlund with regard to his Manchester United future, but there are clubs that are interested in him, not least AC Milan. They remain in talks with Manchester United over the signing of the Danish international. Milan, for their part, they want to do a loan deal with an option to buy. I think Manchester United would prefer a permanent deal for Rasmus Højlund, or at least have some sort of permanent element attached to any kind of loan deal. And I think they would probably consider offers of around £40 million. Now, that could come in two forms. If they were to sell him now and get £40 million, I think they'd consider it. If it was a loan with an option, then maybe they can be quite creative with it, a loan fee, and then the rest of that £40 million made up in an option price later on down the line. I think it's being made clear to Højlund now. I don't think he's under any illusions that maybe Manchester United do want him out. He was an unused substitute in United's pre-season friendly against Fiorentina at the weekend. Ruben Amorim actually chose to play Mason Mount in a false nine ahead of Rasmus Højlund.
That's a massive sign, isn't it?
It is. And I'm sure he's aware of everything that's going on. He's clearly seen Sesko come into the club and him not getting much match time, even though he was the only striker that was available to them that day. But anyway, he has said he wants to stay and fight for his place. But it's now becoming abundantly clear that he's joined the likes of Jadon Sancho, Garnacho, Malacia, Antony, and previously Rashford as players that United would want to get out of the club.
So the famous five became six, it became four, didn't it? Because
it's back to five again.
Back to five, yeah. Goodness. All right, what about any more people joining United? Anything else?
Well, we should say that following Sesko's arrival, I think that the focus, even before Sesko arrived, was on sales. Not necessarily making those sales before players come in, but having an assurance and a knowledge that before the end of the window, some of these sales would happen. We mentioned Rasmus Højlund and AC Milan. Borussia Dortmund still pushing to sign Jadon Sancho. You've got Chelsea and Alejandro Garnacho. Manchester United are definitely expecting a formal offer from Chelsea for Garnacho. Real Betis, yes, they are still trying to sign Antony, however difficult that deal looks. So that would be the priority. However, rather like I said about Arsenal before, if a unique market opportunity was to come along in the remaining 3 weeks of this window, Manchester United want to be in a position where they would be able to do this unique market opportunity. Now, throughout this window, we've talked about areas that they wanted to strengthen, which they have done, particularly in the front line. It's an entire new front three. But central midfielder, talk of that has not gone away. And I don't know whether it's been accentuated, even though United have played OK during pre-season. Some of the criticisms aimed towards them have been the makeup of that central midfield. They are interested in Carlos Baleba from Brighton and Hove Albion. They like the player a lot. They've explored the conditions of a deal. It is going to be a very, very difficult deal to do for many reasons, not least Brighton have got no intention to sell. They don't want to sell. They're under no pressure to sell. He's still got 3 years left on his contract. They've got an option for a further year, and they would want to charge. I mean, some people have even talked about touching 100 million here. So
that's exactly what United need, though, isn't he?
You could argue that that is what they would need. But as far as Brighton are concerned, not for sale, do not want to sell. However, he hasn't featured since July, mid-July, in pre-season, but that's because of a minor knee issue. And I think a lot of people made more of that when he missed the last game when the United interest came, but it was for the same reason that he'd missed the previous 2 games as well.
Damish, everybody knows that there are 5 players at United surplus to requirements. Does that put United in a really weak negotiating position?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't think it's any secret that Manchester United wanted to do business for these players, but the way that football works now in the finances, it's not just about transfer fees. It's about getting wages off the books as well, so that they can go into the market and perhaps do deals using how PSR works. Amortised over a length of a contract is how the transfer fee would be paid. So more and more, if players on high wages, that has become almost as important as when you get the transfer fee as well, even though United would want to maximise the transfer fee. But clearly, of course, when it's almost made public knowledge, not directly from the club, of course, that you want to sell 5 or 6 players, clubs might say, well, we'll just wait then. Wait towards the end of the window and then United will get desperate. Even though Ruben Amorim has said all the right things publicly, if that doesn't happen, we'll reintegrate them into the squad. It's not a problem. But clearly, they want them out. They want to maximise their money. They want to get the wages off the books so that maybe, just maybe, later on in the window, they might just go back in to bring another player in.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll go back to Newcastle and discuss what's been a really tough window for Eddie Howe so far. But with reinforcements on the way and time running out for Liverpool to get Isak, is the tide changing? See you in a bit. Hello again. Newcastle really making the headlines in this window. So let's head back to St James's Park and our reporter Keith Downey. As the days count down in the transfer window, it's becoming more and more likely that Alexander Isak could stay. So how would that go down with the fans? Well, there's Keith. Keith, let's ask them.
Yeah, Mike. Yeah, Mike, thanks very much. Yeah, that is the question, I think, on most people's lips, is how will the Newcastle fans deal with Alexander Isak staying? Should any potential move to Liverpool not materialise over the next 3 weeks? And of course, remember, if this does go through, it will be a Premier League record transfer. So it's not the kind of deal that's going to be done overnight. It might take a little bit of time. And that's why I'm saying as time goes on, I wouldn't say it's becoming increasingly unlikely, but I would say it's becoming increasingly likely that he'll be playing at Newcastle next season unless Liverpool come in with an offer quickly and Newcastle manage to get a replacement lined up. But yeah, you asked me the question, how will the Newcastle fans feel? I suppose I'm better speaking to a Newcastle fan, and I've got Charlotte Robson here from the True Faith podcast. Charlotte, thanks very much for popping along to see us. We are really keen to get the fans' view on this because I think it's pretty clear to see he's not conducted himself greatly, but would you welcome him back with open arms if he starts scoring goals at the start of the season?
Yes, we're fans of we're Newcastle fans. We want to see Newcastle winning. I think it's a really tricky one because I think Newcastle fans are desperate to be behind Alexander Isak, and as all of this news has come out and all of this sort of drama has unfolded over the last few weeks, it's become really difficult to be like, it's probably going to be fine and we still really like him. He's training on his own. He's like, you know, we understand that Eddie Howe's only finding out that he's in Spain through the media and things like that. It just doesn't paint him in the best light, but we really want to get behind our players. That's what we do as fans of this team. So I think if he can get his head down, score goals for us this season and he stays, then yeah, of course we're gonna be okay.
Right, so the bridges haven't been burned too far just yet?
I don't think so.
I think maybe they have with some fans.
Yeah,
maybe you're just a bit more easygoing.
Yeah, I think for some people definitely, like some of the noise on social media and stuff is like he's, you know, like persona non grata here now, like let him go, we don't want him here. He's still one of the best strikers in the world, so I do want him here. I want to see him thrive here. I want to see us kind of like be able to rebuild that relationship if we can, if it's possible. But I'm always that kind of person.
I guess as well, with Hugo Ekitike joining Liverpool, a player who of course Newcastle attempted to sign here, how difficult would it be to see Ekitike and Isak lining up together at Anfield next season? And of course remember, Newcastle's first home match of the season here at St James's Park is against Liverpool.
Yes, it very much is. Yeah, that would be a bitter pill to swallow, I won't lie. We were dead excited about Ekitike. I was really excited about Ekitike and Isak. Like, what could that look like? Up front, two class players up front. And then now it's like, will even one of them play for us? I think that would be really, really difficult. But it isn't necessarily going to be happening. Like, as you say, it's a big deal to get over the line. Not just for Liverpool, but for us. Like, we have to have a replacement. We do not have a backup striker. There just isn't anybody waiting in the wings for that position, so that plays a part in this whole deal as well.
You mentioned backup strikers, and we've been reporting for a number of days now that Newcastle are hoping to bring in Yohan Wissa from Brentford. Again, that's another protracted one. Brentford waiting for a replacement themselves. Yeah. What would you make of him as a backup striker, if you like, to Isak if he stays?
Yeah, backup striker to Isak, that would be fine, but I don't think Wissa is like necessarily a replacement for Alexander Isak. We'd need a bit of a different kind of calibre of striker, I think. So yes, we need somebody else there. We've got a lot of games to play this season. We've got Champions League. We've got hopefully some good runs in the Cup. We've got, you know, the Premier League itself. So we do need somebody else. We can't expect, if Alexander Isak is staying, him to play every single one of those games. It's just not going to happen. So we do need a backup striker. So that would be fine with me.
Malick in today, having a medical. That was after the club clinched the deal with AC Milan at the weekend, £30 million plus add-ons. It looks as though it's close. He's having his medical.
Yeah.
You'll be pleased that there's a defender finally.
Yeah, very pleased. I'm just not going to count my chickens yet because I feel like this summer everything's been ripped from us as we've gotten excited about players. But yes, very, very promising. And kind of the whole Isak thing, I was thinking about this earlier. It feels so kind of sad for Malick because we should be just dead excited about that. That's an excellent player coming from Milan, coming to strengthen our defence, something we've been saying we desperately need to do this summer, but it's kind of getting caught up in all the other noise, and that seems like a bit of a shame. But yes, very excited about that.
Let's mention the other noise, because this was the transfer window where, of course, Newcastle were set to strengthen, as you rightly say, as a Champions League campaign ahead of you, money to spend, but it's not really panned out. Look, you have got a couple of signings in, absolutely, but it's been difficult, hasn't it? How has this window been for the Newcastle United fans? Because it's been difficult for me reporting on it.
I bet, yeah. Well, I started with brown hair. This is all just turned white. Yeah, it's been really disappointing. It's been really, frustrating as fans. Oh, it's starting to rain as we talk about it. That feels fitting. It's just been really, it's just been frustrating. Players feeling like we're kind of being used as a pawn for some players and agents. Maybe that's not the case, but that's what it feels like. And it just has felt so like getting excited about players and then them going to different teams, Liverpool, Manchester United, all of these teams that have kind of been ones we really want to be competing with for so long, and we really feel like we are, and yet they're still pipping us to these players. So that's been really frustrating.
Despite all that, you're looking forward to the season starting this weekend?
God, I'm so tired already. Yes, I am. I'm excited because I think that drowns out a lot of the noise, doesn't it? When you get the football in front of you and you can see what's on the pitch, and actually we've got still, don't want to take away from the fact that we have some absolutely amazing players, and I'm excited to see them back in the Premier League.
Okay, what's Aston Villa away on Saturday, Newcastle's first game. Charlotte said her hair was brown before. My beard was brown at the start of this window. We're all going white. We're all going white. It's been difficult for the supporters. It's been pretty exhausting for me as well, Mike. It's been a long old summer covering Newcastle, I have to say.
Keith, look what transfer windows have done to Darmesh and me. I had a massive afro when they started. Thank you both very much. No, I didn't. Darmesh, right. You know transfer windows better than most. How do you see the Isak situation playing out?
I keep changing my mind about it because the later you go in the window, it's clear Newcastle United will want a replacement. The one thing they've got going in their favour with the Isak situation is that he's still got 3 years left on his contract. Now, this is going to be an almighty job for Eddie Howe if Isak ends up staying or going, both sides, because the replacement that they would have wanted potentially, or to play alongside Isak at the start, McAtee, is no longer on the table. Benjamin Sesko, they went so hard on Benjamin Sesko, couldn't get that deal over the line. The Jan Wissel one, as Charlotte and Keith were talking about there, is more to do with a replacement maybe for Callum Wilson, numbers-wise, rather than the Isak replacement. So now you've got to ask the question, who is the replacement for Alexander Isak? Who is out there? There's talk that they might be keeping half an eye on Nicholas Jackson. Is he ready to fill someone like Isak's boots? Very, very difficult. And so if he isn't to go, then the next job Eddie Howe's got to do is reintegrate him and make up almost, because he can't be pleased the way that Isak's conducted himself. Like they mentioned there, hearing that he's in Spain through the media. I mean, it's not ideal at all. So I haven't answered your question, have I? But it's I keep changing my mind. At the moment, stays. I'm erring towards stays at the moment.
Whoa, OK, interesting. All right, when we come back, more from Tottenham and Nottingham Forest. No, Fulham and Nottingham Forest, chase wingers, that's what I meant to say. Bournemouth set for another big windfall. Charlie Austin was Virgil van Dijk's teammate when he left Southampton for Liverpool. And he has a warning for Newcastle over Isak. That and more to come. Hello again. Last part of the transfer show already. Now, Charlie Austin was at Southampton when Virgil van Dijk handed in a transfer request to push through a move to Liverpool. The striker says there are similarities with Alexander Isak's position at Newcastle.
So Pellegrino come in, was the manager, and it was the first day of pre-season. Obviously, Virgil had been involved talks with Liverpool, and the clubs were talking, couldn't agree a fee, and he'd obviously told the football club he didn't want to play no more. So the manager got us all in on the pitch, all the players, and just said, welcome back, lads, it's going to be hard pre-season, looking forward to going in. And by the way, just to let you know, Virgil's been speaking, has told the football club that he doesn't want to play for him anymore. So he's going to go and train over on pitch 12 or something like that on his own. And that was it. And we didn't see him again for the rest of pre-season. It wasn't until he didn't get the move and the window shut, and then he was integrated back into the team. Now, as a player, at the start, I thought massive respect for the manager for doing that. But also, when you've got someone of that quality, you want them in the team. So as soon as the window shut and he was a part of the football club still, I was delighted he was back in the team and back in the group, because you want to play with top players and you know they make you better.
So reintegration does work then, Dharmesh?
Yeah, I mean, it can. I'm going back to that interview that Keith was doing with Charlotte Robson earlier. As soon as someone starts scoring goals again, in the case of Isak,
exactly,
I think a lot of things can be forgiven, but it's going to... You know, you can't rule anything out with the Isak deal. You could end up with a situation where he might even sign a new contract at Newcastle. You just don't know what can happen.
Love it. All right, let's run through some of the day's other news then. Right, is this for real? Are Fulham really signing a Brazilian winger called Kevin?
So, Fulham have held talks with Shakhtar Donetsk over Kevin Santos Lopez de Macedo.
I like Kevin.
A.K.A. Kevin. That's what he wants to be known as, Kevin. Those discussions, though, highlighted a gap in valuation between what Fulham were prepared to pay and what Shakhtar would want. I think Fulham are now deciding internally whether they're going to go back in with an improved offer. He's a Brazil under-20 international, formerly was one. He's still got 3 years left on his current contract, which is probably why Shakhtar are thinking we're in a good position here. Fulham still interested in doing a deal. We mentioned it before for the Arsenal forward Reece Nelson as well. Dialogue between the clubs remains open on that one.
Amari Hutchinson, top player. I'm surprised that all sorts of Premier League clubs aren't hanging around. What's the latest on him?
Right, so Nottingham Forest, we think, might push again for him. They're deciding whether to go back in for Amari Hutchinson or indeed move on to other targets. Now, you remember earlier on in this transfer window, Forest had a bid worth £35 million rejected by Ipswich Town for Amari Hutchinson. Now, that offer was the same value as Hutchinson's relegation clause. Unfortunately for Forest, they put that offer in after the relegation clause had expired. As far as Ipswich are concerned, they've got no intention to sell Hutchinson, and they value him at much higher than £35 million. Brentford also held an interest earlier on in this transfer window. They met the conditions, they met the value of the relegation clause of £35 million, but not the conditions of how that money would be paid. Hence, they couldn't come to an agreement. And by the time those talks continued, the relegation clause was null and void. So Ipswich can do what they want now. They can charge what they want. He was not part of their squad for the Friday night opening game at St Andrews against Birmingham City. That was due to illness. Now, it's understood he does want to make the move back to the Premier League. Definitely another one to keep an eye on.
Right, if you're a Bournemouth fan, you must be really cheesed off because all the best players going, news of another one.
Yes, but they sell well, do Bournemouth. And this is a big move, actually, because Ilya Zabani, the defender, is on his way. Yeah, and he's on his way to... We saw Dean Howson go to Real Madrid. We saw Kirkes go to Liverpool, and now Ilya Zabani looks like he's on his way to Paris Saint-Germain because the clubs have now agreed, a total agreement is in place now for the player. The deal is worth €63 million guaranteed with add-ons, so that's around £54.5 million. He's now free to discuss personal terms. He actually flew out to France yesterday for a medical. They were very reluctant to sell him. Clearly they were. They didn't want to lose another defender, as you were mentioning there. But he expressed his desire to leave, and he said, I want to go to PSG. For the player himself, would he get this opportunity again is the question you have to ask. PSG have been chasing him for a bit. They made their first contact in June, so it's been a long-running interest in the player. But Bournemouth aren't hanging around. This hasn't come by accident. Bafodé Diakité is in line to replace Zabani, and that would have been in place long before Zabani left for PSG.
Very quickly, Mikey Moore on loan at Rangers, but signed a new deal at Spurs. Can you just run us through the deal?
Yeah, we told you before it was a straight loan from Tottenham Hotspur to Rangers, but he's signed a new long-term contract with Tottenham Hotspur, as we expected him to do, because they see Mikey Moore as a big part of their future plans.
He is the future, yeah, isn't he?
100%. I mean, that's why they were not going to even contemplate any kind of option or an obligation.
Yeah. All right.
Said, we want you in our future, so it's only a straight loan.
Dharmesh, sterling work today. Much more on the transfer show tomorrow. We are back again, of course. And Sky Sports News is next with all of the rest of the day's sports headlines. Enjoy.